Hey, welcome to Gold's Garage, and welcome back to Gold's Garage again. And as you can see, we're not at Gold's Garage today. Today we're at Darrell Water Dyno Service in Springfield, Ontario. Mike Kimball is with me, and I know we've been leading up. We've actually made 9 or 10 videos about this build, and the theme of it is...
This is 10.
This is 10, okay. A budget build, and we actually said we could try to make... We actually said we'd try to make 375 horsepower with less than $2,000. And today we're going to put it on the dyno and make some dyno runs and let you see that on video and see what we actually do. But I call this Reality YouTube because our intent in the whole series of videos was to be real, give anybody watching that wants to build an engine or is building engines and wants to learn more a real life experience of starting with their grungy old core that we started with, and now we're sitting on the dyno ready to make a pull. And it's reality. So, and the good news is it's DIY, do it yourself. And why would you want to do that? There's 2 reasons. One is to save money, and that's part of the theme of this. And Mike's going to talk about the budget. And we already know we did achieve, or Mike achieved his budget. He did all the research, all the homework, parts procurement, a lot of the work on the engine. He took care of the heads and cleaning the block and all that stuff. And I basically assembled the engine for him. So that's the budget side. On the other side, why would you want to do it yourself? And I call it psychic income, that great feeling you get when you know you did it yourself. That's worth something itself, and you save money, and you got a good result, and you understand what you did. And a point of that is, I want to make a point here about that. There's lots of YouTube videos, and there's lots of awesome video. I watch them myself all the time. There's lots of information out there. But if you're watching this, and you're watching other videos, and you're going to take action, don't do anything just because somebody tells you, even if it's me. Make sure you understand what you're doing, and you understand the consequences, and you know why you're doing it, and you have an expectation of what the results are going to be. Don't take anybody on blind faith. So, and leading up to that, we got something to fess up as well, because it's reality. And we said we'd be real in this thing. So we already made 9 videos before today. And since the last video that we made, I said I would do a leak down and compression test, and I did do that. I didn't get it on video. I don't always have someone available on the camera. Sometimes I just got to get work done. And the results of the leak down and compression tests were disappointing. And we have 3 cylinders at least in this engine that have fairly high levels of blow-by. And certainly that's going to modify our expectations, change our expectations. And typically, like in the previous video I made of a 400, I put that engine together. I had the cylinder heads, they were Promax cylinder heads. I had completely rebuilt at a machine shop, a reputable machine shop, new valve guides, valve job and everything. First time I put them on the heads, I had excessive leak down. I took the heads back off, took it back to the machine shop and had them fix them. In this case, I just did this a few days ago. We have an expectation that we're going to make a video. We got people telling us, come on, get this video going because we're getting tired of waiting on you. So we're going to do that today. And we're going to go into this knowing that it's probably not going to be as good as we hope. So just to be real, and if you do things yourself, you have to be realistic. And so what are the 3 things that might affect the outcome? The leak down on some of the valves is definitely going to be a factor. Mike hand-honed this engine, and we did it, the methodical way, and it's probably as good as any amateur job can be, but it's certainly not what you would get if you went to a machine shop and had a Sun and Hone machine and give you a custom-built finish on the engine. And Mike ported the cylinder heads, so he's never ported heads before. He had lots of good advice from Austin Ward, who was here helping us as well. But there's still steel Chevrolet stock compression heads, stock heads, and modified by someone that hasn't done it before. So who knows? I mean, those are the 3 factors that might affect it. I already know from the compression tests that it's not as much as we thought. and the leak down test. And let me make a point about leak down test. So I've tested many engines with my Moroso leak down tester. Can you hand it to me, Tom? And the benchmark for me, because I think leak down does vary depending on how much air you got coming in and the tool you're using. This is my Moroso leak down tester. I've probably tested 100 engines with it. So my benchmark is our race engine that's custom machine at a high-end racing shop and has probably as good of cylinder seal as you can get. We, on this tester, gets 11 and 12% average leak down. So that would be perfect. Now, when I did the leak down test, the engine hadn't been run yet. The rings are Molly rings. They're not broken in yet. Certainly after a few pulls, we hope that will get better because the rings will seat in and improve the sealing of the engine. However, at the same time, typically with a new engine before I bring it to the dyno is probably averaging somewhere between 12 and 15% on average. And our average is quite a bit higher than that because of we have excessive leak down on 3 cylinders. So we're going to make some pulls and see what happens, and we're going to show you the results. One of the other points I need to make is, before we do that, is because we test, if you built this engine yourself and you didn't do this, you'd probably put it in your car and run it, and you'd never know the difference because it runs fine, doesn't burn oil, doesn't smoke, sounds great, but we know that it's got excessive leak down. So that's why we test, and that's why we dyno. So we're going to dyno it today. If it doesn't meet our expectations, we're going to take it home and fix it, and take the heads back off and fix the valves that are leaking, and that'll give us our best chance because Mike's going to put this in his car, and he wants it in there for a long time. So, Mike, so I'll turn it over to you. You're the guy that did all the thinking behind this project. I just did some of the grunt work, and you can explain where you're at from your side of it. So.
What's up, guys? I'll talk about all that stuff later. I'll go over the budget. Right now, let's make some pulls on the dyno and see what it does.
Hey, welcome back. So in this clip, we've made a dyno pull, and the curve shows that we're not getting enough advance, especially at low RPM. So we're going to take a spring out of the distributor advance and see if that makes any difference. And we'll talk about the actual results in another clip here, but I want to just do that for now. So the cap has to come off, first of all, and we need to just take the wiring out just to make so we can manipulate it. There we go. Get the cap out of the way. Maybe from this side, Mike, might be easier because I got to put the cap over there. Eh? So the distributor mechanical advance is created by centrifugal weight of the weights, which you'll see in a minute. And it's limited by spring trowel slots and the strength of the springs. And for what it's worth, for fine tuning, you can buy kits with different strength of springs and use them to speed up your advance at low RPM or limit it if you want. Sometimes you may have too much advance, and that can happen. One of the issues at our high RPM, if the springs are not strong enough, you might set your timing at 38 degrees, and at high RPM, it might be something higher than that. So, but we're going to try this right now because by the curve of the dyno graph, we're not getting enough advance at low speed. So I'm going to see what that does. So we need to take this little cover off. This distributor is one that I've used many times, and I mean, this is probably about the 10th one I've purchased. I usually kind of my standard for a new engine. It's good enough. It's you can buy it. I've talked about it before in previous videos. You can buy it on Amazon for less than $100 Canadian. And it's got adjustable vacuum advance. So what we're going to do here today, take one of these springs off. As soon as I get strong enough to do that, might have to use a pair of pliers. So let's see how it works. So as the engine revs up, these weights want to fly out. And so see this slot here? What that does is advances the distributor ahead of the engine as it does that. So that's how you get a centrifugal advance. So we're going to take one of the springs off. As soon as I find a way to get it off. There we go. I got it off with my fingers. Somebody save that for me. Thank you. Put the cap back on and we'll see what it does. Okay, we're going to make another pull now, and I want to focus on something. The top left-hand corner, the blue bar is the oil pressure, and green bar is oil pressure, and as it revs up, it's going to increase. I had a question, comment on my channel. We started this engine up with 20 W50 break-in oil, Lucas break-in oil. And we've dumped that oil and changed it, and now it's got 30 weight oil. And so initially when I first started, it actually had 90 pounds of oil at idle. Probably not as hot as the oil is right now because we've made some pulls on it. But let's watch and see what happens to the oil pressure, because we don't want 90 psi of oil pressure. And that's why I went to the lighter oil, and we can go lighter than that if we have to. But I think we've got pretty good numbers here. So. If you're interested in that part of it, keep your eye on that part of the video, or that part of the screen. Show the oil pressure again. So there's our oil pressure at idle, and that's a good number. So we're happy with the oil we have in it. So. $344. Okay, so before we made the dyno pulls, I created a little introduction to this project. We've made this our 10th video, and we're finally on the dyno making pulls, and we're going to give you results finally. So that's what everybody's been waiting for. So before I did that, I mentioned that just prior to coming here, we realized on the leak down test that we didn't have happy numbers, and kind of lowered our expectations. So we made a couple pulls now. We've actually tried everywhere from 34 to 38 degrees timing. We've changed fuel air ratio. We've changed jets. We're probably pretty close that we're going to get with this where the camshaft is. The camshaft's right in on center line at 104 degrees right now. And so we're probably pretty close. So you can always play for a few more, but we're at 345 horsepower, and we've made 400 foot-pounds of torque. We wanted more than that, but realistically, you have to expect if you got 3 or 4 cylinders aren't pulling their weight, you're not going to get maximum power. So when we're done today, we're going to do another leak down test, and if it hasn't improved, we're going to take it home, take the heads off, and we're going to fix the problem. We got some exhaust valves leaking, and we got well over 25% of leak down on 3 cylinders at least, and that's probably contributing to disappointing numbers actually. So not sure if we're going to dyno it again, but The point to make, I guess, in the video is that we're trying to be realistic and give you realistic results and expectations. And if you never dynoed it and you just built it and put it in your car, the engine runs fine. It doesn't smoke, it doesn't burn oil, it's great. It sounds great, runs great, accelerates great, but it wouldn't be as much as you expected for the reasons that I mentioned. So that's it on this clip, and we'll come back for more. I'm going to have Daryl Waters, our dyno expert, talk to someone's asked to better explanation of what each of the dyno report metrics mean and how we interprets them, and whether we're good or bad or whatever, and Daryl's going to give you his comments on that. Okay, we're here to learn, and so far, as I mentioned, we have a whole recorded trail of changes in timing, fuel, jets in the carburetor, etc. We've only used the one 4-barrel carburetor so far. We are going to make a run yet on the 2-barrel carburetor. But it's pulling right now almost exactly 500 CFM, so that's probably about the right size. And the 2-barrel is exactly 500 CFM, so let's see what that does. So Austin suggests maybe we could have a better, if we shorten the length of the header collector. So we're going to do that next. We're going to put a shorter header collector in, and that is, I won't predict the results. We'll see what the results give us, and then we'll tell you about it when we get there. So. Are we on? Okay, we changed the collectors on the headers to a shorter collector, and we're just going to see if that helps. So we're back here. We just showed you, Daryl, we put a set of shorter collectors on the headers. So far today we've done a lot of things to try and get this motor working as good as possible. And jet sizes, fuel air ratio, timing up and down the chart, and we've also tried spacers, etc. And so now the latest thing, we put a shorter collector on. So Daryl's going to give you his take on what that did, positive and negative, as a result of that test. So go ahead, Daryl.
So you guys seen the collectors that I had on before, and they're probably 12 inches long. We were looking at the dyno sheets, and there shows on the one section in here called the brake specific air consumption. I can explain all that, what it means later, but this chart here, we were getting up into the 7s. And the previous one, they were even higher because that was with the long collector. This is with the shorter one. So our average brake specific air consumption was 6.68 with the long collector. We put the short collector on, we dropped down to 6.62. That's about as best we're going to get and still be able to make torque, because you want scavenging to help pull the charge in. So we changed it from the long collector to the short collector. Average torque was 371.8 with the long collector. Short collector is 372. So we actually gained a little bit of average torque. Average horsepower with the long one was 285.6, and average with the short collector was 286. So we gained average on both, and I know we've covered it before that average is more important than peak. But we dropped peak torque from 400.5 down to 396.8. So we lost a bit of peak torque, but our average is better. So the car, you're going to actually feel the average. You don't feel the peak torque numbers. And horsepower-wise, maximum horsepower went up from 344.6 to 347.1. And the reason that is because when you're over scavenging, you get a lot more of that air-fuel mixture is actually going out the pipes instead of staying in the cylinder and making horsepower. So that's why we decided to change. Austin came up with that. He says, put a shorter collector on and try it. So we put a shorter one on it, and we actually gained horsepower and torque average. So that's more important than anything else as far as I'm concerned. So we tried it, it worked, and we're going to try some more stuff yet. We're not done.
Got your 350. We had one of the comments on my channel, we got some circle track racers, and they use rules that are almost similar to this engine. Stock heads, I think the camshaft lift is limited to 450 or something like that. And that's about what this camshaft is. And so the question is, how much power can it make with a 500 CFM two-barrel carburetor? Don't laugh, because probably more than you think. In our super stock racing here in Ontario, we have to use, on the 602 grade engines, we use a 500 CFM carburetor. So I have one here today. It is a racing carburetor, and they work pretty good. So we've made 352 horsepower so far with this 650 4-barrel, but it's taken almost exactly 500 CFM of flow. Daryl can measure how much airflow it's taken, and it's right on 500. So we're going to put the 500 CFM carburetor on next and see what it does. Okay, this one's for circle track racers, because I had some questions and comments on the video. Because, as I mentioned a minute ago, this engine specs are pretty close to some circle track rules, where you have to run a two-barrel carburetor, a limitation on the cam lift, and stock heads. And so this motor is pretty well that. So here it is. We have a 500 CFM carburetor adapted onto our 4-ball manifold, and we're going to make a pull and see what it does. So far we've made 352 horsepower and 407 pounds of torque. We'll see what the two-barrel does. Let's make a pull and see. Okay, we're going to probably make one more pull. So far we've had two carburetors on, and the 650 that Daryl is basically his shop carburetor. Most of the pulls were based on that, and we'll talk about it more after, but we got 407 torque and 352 horsepower, I think, and we'll describe all the background to that. But this is a quick fuel carburetor, so Austin Ward, our good friend and supporter, who's a local successful drag racer, had this one with him today, so we're going to see what it does compared to, it's the same size, And I'll leave the detail of the 500 CFM pull up to Daryl when he talks about it in a minute here. So let's make this pull first, and we'll come back and cover that off. And then we're going to close off with our final comments and remarks and give you the best advice we can if you're thinking of doing this, okay?
Back might be a little high.
It won't hurt anything. It won't hurt anything.
Carburetor runs.
Okay, welcome back to Gold's Garage. We're finishing up here. We've done finished making pulls, and first I got to have Mike. This is Mike's budget build, and he's going to show you the budget. We're going to put a screenshot of his actual budget up and show you that result, and then I'm going to get Daryl to take his seat and talk about the dyno results and show you great progress that we made here today. It was a lot of hard work. We've been here since 10 o'clock in the morning. It's 3:30. We've made a lot of changes, and that's where we're at right now. So, Mike, why don't you go ahead and talk about your budget, and we'll go from there.
So we came in under budget. It didn't quite make the horsepower we were shooting for, but as Al mentioned earlier in the video, we had some leak down issues, so maybe we would have made it. But it comes in under $5 per horsepower is what we made. And we made over 400 foot-pounds of torque and over 350 horsepower, so over a horsepower per cubic inch. So I would say it was a success all in all.
Okay, and you're going to put a screenshot of your actual
I'll
line,
put a
the line
screenshot of the
items that
actual
go into
budget,
make, because someone that's looking at doing this, planning it out, you want to look at all the line items and make sure you got them covered, and not get halfway through and realize you forgot to buy the heads or pistons or something like that, and it's going to be a lot more than you thought. So we'll put that screenshot up, and that's all you got about that. So next we're going to have Daryl in here talk about how to read the dyno results and what we did, what we accomplished today, and that's next. Okay, before we close off, I got Daryl in the chair now on his Mopar chair, and he's going to show you how he interprets his results of the dyno and how he found us some pretty good gains in horsepower and torque today. But before that, I want to introduce you to my team that's been here with me all day and supported me. Tom Winkler, my good friend. Tom is a tool and die maker, a machinist, automotive machinist from a racing machine shop by trade, so he's got lots of knowledge and experience. Alec Vendrig, my good friend, who helps and supports me in everything that I do, and we play hockey and golf together for what it's worth. So Austin Ward has kind of been a consultant and advisor. Austin's a local drag racer, a very successful one. He makes amazing horsepower in stock and super stock classes. I'm not sure how they do it, but they do. And so Austin's been helping us out with it as well. Sarah is Daryl's lady, and she's here with us today, and she actually brought some nourishment and kept us going. And Gary Watson, one of my first customers. Actually, the engine in Gary's car was the first engine I dynoed at Daryl's shop here. So they've been all with me here today, supporting me, and now we're going to get down to the details and turn it over to Daryl to talk about the dyno results. And you do put whatever you got, Daryl, and if I see any gaps, I'll cover them off at the end for you. How's that?
All right. Alan said that he's had a lot of viewers ask how we interpret the dyno sheets. So there's a few pages. I don't use every bit of information on the dyno sheets, but the first line or column is torque, is horsepower, and then with a 4-barrel carburetor, I set them up so that I can see the fuel flow into the front of the carburetor and the fuel flow in the back of the carburetor. So it's kind of like setting it up as two barrels. So I can see which side of the carburetor needs to be richened up or leaned out. Then you have your air-fuel ratio. Airflow in cubic feet per minute, so it shows on there like 487 CFM, so we know that the 650 carb's plenty big enough. Brake specific fuel consumption, that's pounds of fuel per horsepower per hour. So what that means is if you ran the engine wide open for 1 hour and made 1 horsepower, it would use, like for that one, for example, 0.94 pounds of fuel. So that's kind of an efficiency reading. And then we have volumetric efficiency. The first page is measured torque and power. So that's what horsepower and torque the engine made today with this atmospheric pressure, temperature. The next page is corrected horsepower. So that's corrected to Society of Automotive Engineers with 29.92 inches of mercury, 60-degree dry air at sea level. They use that so that if we take this engine off my dyno and take it to someone else's dyno, it should make very comparable numbers to this. The first sheet will be completely different because of it changes on day to day, but it corrects to this so that you can do repeated tests from day to day so you can see your gains and losses. And then the rest of the data on here is going to be exactly the same as the first sheet. And then we show fluid, like water temperature, and it measures everything 100 RPM increments. Next page, I have as far as manifold pressure and oil pressure. I didn't have a port to measure vacuum on the Holly HP carburetor, so I can't tell you what that is, but normally what I'll do is I'll watch the manifold pressure, and 4-barrel carburetors are rated at 1.5 inches of mercury vacuum. That's how they get their 650 CFM flow. So if this was all zeros, if that was an actual reading, that carburetor would be way too big. So you would get that if you had like a 950 on this engine. And then last page, the only column I really pay attention to in this one is the brake specific air consumption. On this one, it's got up into the high 6s and 7s. So what that means is that there's a lot more air going out the exhaust, air and fuel. It's not staying in the cylinder, so we're losing horsepower there. But that's something we can't really change because it's got a hydraulic cam. If we had a solid lifter cam in it, then we could loosen the exhaust lash off, which actually changes the duration and lift. Will actually lower scavenging so that it keeps more power or more fuel and air in the engine. We'll get more horsepower and torque out of it. That's how I interpret the dyno sheets. There's other stuff on there like for mechanical efficiency, which that's a standard. We can't change that. That's the frictional losses and everything in the engine. That's how much horsepower it takes for the engine to run itself. So we printed a graph off, and I overlaid from the very first run, which is shown in blue and red. So that's the power graph for the horsepower, and that's torque for the very first run. And then after we got done tuning, that's the torque curve and the horsepower curve. And you see with jetting and timing, we can get the engine to run a lot smoother throughout the power band and get rid of all these dips and everything so that it's pulling nice and smooth all the way through. So we get a lot more, we get more like a smoother acceleration. But that's basically it in a nutshell, what we use to tune the engine from start to finish.
Okay.
So
Good job, Daryl.
So if anybody has any other questions, you can post it with Alan, and I'll see if I can answer them.
Sure, we're going to have some questions and comments, Daryl. So this is the result of lots of hard work. We've been here a long time. Daryl's the man in terms of giving us good advice, and Austin has as well. And look at the results. So if you watch the whole video, I started off in the introduction to state that this is reality, and this is basically a home-built job in this case. Mike did most of the work, and just prior to coming here, we did a leak down test, and we realized we had some leaky exhaust valves. So we decided to go ahead. There's an expectation we're going to do this dyno today, so we didn't have time to do anything about that. If it would have been a different situation, I'd have taken the heads off and probably repaired them, but we went ahead, and so even though we had disappointing leak down numbers, we still got over 350 horsepower. We're going to take this motor home and take the heads off and fix the leaking exhaust valves, and it'll probably make, I think we estimated, or we hoped we'd make 375 when we started. So we made the budget. Reality is, and for what it's worth, guys, we're trying to give you the real life experience. If you're looking at doing something like this, it doesn't always go perfectly. And you don't stop there, you fix the problem and move on. Okay, for a 2-barrel, guys, we made a couple pulls actually with the 2-barrel, and that's on the video. You'll see the adapter that we use between the 2-barrel and 4-barrel. That's not what we use on our race car. That's just for my test stand at home so I can work on 2-barrel carburetors on 4-barrel manifolds. So you may have a different setup. But we lost 20 horsepower and 27 foot-pounds of torque compared to the 650 carburetor. Even though the 650 was only taking 499 CFM, the 2-barrel took less than that. So if you're running a 2-barrel and you can sneak a 4-barrel in there for the feature, you're going to make about 20 more horsepower. So good luck to you. So the last comment I have to make is, if you're going to do something like this, if you're lucky enough to have access to a service like Daryl provides, he's taught us a lot by doing this. I don't know how many engines he's done for me now.
I couldn't even count.
Pardon?
I can't even count. It's been
either.
like 30 years. So.
But we learned, Daryl's been doing this for a lot longer. I've been working on cars since before he was born, by the way, but he's been doing this for a lot longer than I have. So we're knocking on his experience, and we learned a lot. And if you have the opportunity to do that, because the point is, this engine starts and runs fine, doesn't burn oil, doesn't smoke, there's no excessive blow-by coming out of the motor or anything like that. But because we did a leak down test, and we showed the leak down test in the previous clip of this video, we know there's something not right. So we're going to go ahead and fix it. If you just built this and you didn't make those checks, or you didn't dyno it, you'd never ever know the difference. You put it in the car and think you had 375 horsepower and you got 352 horsepower. So that's part of the message. DIY, get the experience, have the satisfaction of knowing you did it yourself, and save yourself a lot of money. There is no labor content in Mike's budget, because the assumption is if you're going to do this, you're going to do it all yourself. So obviously you don't just save money, but you get a lot of satisfaction. So hope you stuck with it. Fairly long video. We did a lot of things today. And if you haven't already, please like or subscribe. We'll try to make interesting videos for you in the future. And for any aspects of this build that we didn't cover off, sometimes I don't have a camera crew waiting at my side every time I do something. I've got to get work done, so we probably did miss a few points. We'll cover those off in future videos. We finish one engine, take this one home and fix it, and then we start another one. So thanks for watching Gold's Garage.